Hi, this is Eddie George with my Camtasia smartboard lesson. Sorry, a little tired. So I'm just going to be going through this music lesson. Most of the things I can will actually be able to do. Some things I can only do with the smartboard, and they don't seem to be working in my smartboard notebook. But we'll address that when we get there. Okay. This obviously is for music. It concerns the multiple families of instruments. There are 4 of them. This is for students grade 3 through 6, and all the knowledge that they need to come in with is how musical instruments generally make music, not really specifically, and that simply the sounds can be higher or lower and can be loud or soft. So very, very basic. By the end of this lesson, students will be able to identify families of instruments. The 4 families of instruments are the strings, the woodwinds, the brass, and the percussion. They should be able to identify the sounds of instruments and notice how they blend, and tell how each family of instruments produces sound. Instruments, again, can be grouped into 4 major families: strings, brass, woodwinds, and percussion. Each instrument family has unique sounds produced in different ways. Again, instrument families consist of strings, brass, woodwinds, and percussion. Instruments have different timbre. Timbre is a very subtle aspect of music. It just simply concerns with just the very minute changes and qualitative distinctions in the sound an instrument makes. And instruments produce sound in different ways. They don't all work the same. A clarinet doesn't make the same. Does not produce music the same way a trumpet does, or a violin, or a piano. Okay, so this is a very interesting assignment. I'm going to turn up the volume here so you can see it. So for this lesson, a student would come up, and so I would call on a student, and they would come and touch one of the music notes. So I'm going to do that now. It's going to play a recording. And the student would think and say, "I think that is a trumpet." And they would go to the eraser and they would erase the ink next to the recording and find out, yes, it was a trumpet. Very good job. And then they would write down 2 things that about the trumpet. 1 second. Still trying to learn how to use this. Okay, I'm just going to go for the pen. I'm going to say bright sound because the trumpet is a very loud instrument. And this could be whatever the student recognizes, and obviously if they were unable to really pick something specific out, you guide them towards a more proper response. So bright sound, it's also in the brass family of instruments, so that would be a good point to mention. And so as you can see, I thought this was a very cool lesson, all the interactivity. So then move on to the next student. That student would go, "I think that sounds like a violin." They erase it. Sure enough, it is a violin. They would write something on there, and two things. Again, moving on to the next student. And that sounds like a clarinet. Oh, I was wrong. That was an oboe. Apologize. They're quite similar, but I guess we all make mistakes. It's an oboe. And then again, move on to the next student. Sorry, move on to the next student. And that is a snare drum. And so one of the great things about this lesson is that there are multiple interactive parts, so that not only can a student interact, but multiple students can all have a turn interacting and learning in a pretty cool way. So this part doesn't seem to be working for me in notebook. I've tried playing with it for a while. I'd like to maybe use a smartboard and see if I could get it to work, but ideally each one of these would play a sound clip from a different instrument, and the student would have to sort the music clips into the proper category based on what they hear, which I think would be really, really cool. But again, it does not seem to be working, so I'm going to have to skip over that. And then that also works for every family of instrument, which also, by the way, during this time is when I would go over what distinctions are between each. So the string instruments like violin, cello, viola, bass all have played with a bow and have 4 strings that you just vibrate the bow on to create sound. The brass all have a mouthpiece that you use to buzz and it produces sound. Woodwinds use reeds that vibrate to produce sound. And percussion are all impact instruments, so you just hit them against something or rub them or whatever, they produce sound. Okay, so this last page is one of my favorite. It is a great interactive tool to use with students. Basically, you can get the students to come up and put an instrument in the band and then hit conduct, and it plays a sample of what they sound like. So not only can you hear the sound of each individual instrument, but you can hear the sound of whole sections. Or multiple sections mixed together. So here's woodwind and percussion. That symbol's a little off, but my personal favorite, the tuba. It's a little low and hard to hear, but again, you can see how this is just a great teaching tool. So not only are kids seeing and hearing the differences in instruments, but they're also actively being involved in sorting them and explaining the differences, as well as just being a part of that difference. Because with this, it's very, very easy to hear the difference between, woodwinds and percussion or strings and brass. It's just a very neat teaching tool. So we would spend a lot of time on this in class. And that's the end. So thank you very much for listening to this, and I'll see you in class.